Well, good evening, Mount Lebanon. I want to welcome everyone to the 21-22 Mount Lebanon School District Budget Forum. It is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, March 10th, and I'm live from my office here in D30 of the high school. Tonight, we hope to drill down into some detail of the nuances of our budget and try to help the community understand our process and our projections. The pandemic has affected our budget significantly this year, and I will address those areas in detail tonight. First slide is our district mission and vision statement. In the business office, we take the district mission and vision very seriously. We strive to provide useful information for our stakeholders to effectively make decisions in the relentless pursuit of excellence. Here is our constituent-driven strategic plan. It's my job here in the business office, along with my staff, to help our administration and our school board determine how much these goals will cost, and it is our goal to align our budget with our strategic plan. This is a slide I've carried around for years, and I think it's acceptable to read. Budgeting is the accepted method for governments to allocate scarce resources to demanded services. As a result, it is a powerful tool and one of the most important governmental processes. The budget process focuses attention on the decisions the government makes concerning overall direction, priorities, and use of resources. As the focal point for key resource decisions, the budget process can help governments make better financial and program decisions, improve operations, and enhance relations with citizens and stakeholders. This slide is all too familiar with everyone in Mount Lebanon. This is our student-centered budgeting model, and it keeps academics at the core of our decision-making. When we're looking to make reductions to the budget, we make sure they come as far away from the classroom as possible. When you talk about a school district budget, enrollment is a very key piece of that. Enrollment drives personnel. So these are some early enrollment projections for next year. We're projecting 5,368 students to enroll next school year. That number of 5,300 has held steady for the better part of a decade and probably going back 30 years, honestly, and we're very thankful for that. You lose funding and you lose people when you lose enrollment. So we're very happy with that. This is a new slide this year. I'm working with a software company called Forecast5, and they help in my budget development and projection models for the next 5 years. And they also help me get data from other school districts to compare our resources to. So there's just a couple different ways to look at the demographics of students. As you can see, the percentage of low-income students in the top left corner up there with the orange balls has increased over the last 10 years. We were hovering around 8%. Now we're near 13% with low-income students. Part of our enrollment projection is for the district to do a cohort survival method of projection for enrollment, and that's what we use to calculate those figures. The district tracks live birth data from Allegheny County and our community to make enrollment projections as those kids become school age and then subsequently matriculate through the grades. This also is one of my Forecast5 slides. This is something we do comparatively with other districts and making sure our staffing is correct here. We factor in the number of staff to students in our ratio or full-time equivalent count of teachers. And that is the ratio. This year, we're looking at 373.9 FTEs, and that's about 14.85 students per teacher. We currently have about 437 members in our CBA. However, that includes nurses, counselors, librarians, special education teachers. These FTEs focus on classroom teachers. So comparatively speaking, these are some local comparators that we benchmark ourselves against here. And as you can see, we fall right in the middle as far as student per teacher FTE comparison at 14.85. Some more FTEs as far as student support staff. Again, we have 25.5 FTEs handling that that ratio there. And these, again, were our counselors, nurses, occupational and physical therapists, psychologists, and social workers. So the theme of the evening and the theme of, I think, every school budget season is our mandated costs. We have obligations to our employees, to our students, to the state of Pennsylvania, and to our debt holders. These costs will happen just by opening the doors to our school, and they are either bound by contract or school code, and they must be met. Discretionary spending is at a minimum here in Mount Lebanon. In fact, we spend just about $1.5 million in consumable supplies. The second theme of the evening, and definitely one of the things that we're watching this budget season, is there are a ton of unknowns and some revenue shortfalls that we're projecting. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've been watching these items very carefully. We continue to get bad news from the state and its ability to balance their budget adequately and fund schools without a significant federal intervention. There's also the governor's budget, which is on the table, that adds to the personal income tax and also has some charter school reform legislation in there, which I will address later. But currently, we think that those proposals will be dead on arrival in our legislature. We have received 3 rounds of federal stimulus, ESSER 1, 2 PCCD pass-through grants. We're currently working on ESSER 2, and all 3 of those grants total about $1.4 million. Now, these funding sources were very helpful for us to manage the pandemic. However, they are not windfalls to make up for any revenue shortfalls we have. Those come with parameters to spend on, and we allocated those appropriately to technology and cleaning supplies and PPE necessary for our teachers and staff to return here to school. The big news, I think, is that earned income tax is trending about $100,000 behind this year. We continue to monitor that. It's boomerang at this point. Some months it's up, some months it's down, so we just continue to monitor that. Real estate transfer tax, another one of our big local income taxes, is trending appropriately. However, we saw the sale of a property that increased its value by $8 million, and that is kind of skewing the numbers at this point. Delinquent tax is pretty much running as normal. We did switch to a new delinquent tax collector this year, and we're seeing those collections just as they've been in the past. We've also had none or very little ticket sales this year for our fine arts events and our athletic events. Those can total anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year. So we're missing out on that revenue. And we've also had the absence of the tuition for our F1 students. They pay roughly $20,000 a year. These are students from overseas that would like to come to Mount Lebanon, and we see anywhere from 3 to 7 of those students each year. And the big story and the most significant impact to this budget is definitely the interest income. Last year at this time, I would have stood here and said that our interest income would be projected at $1.2 million. Right now, we're looking at about $13,000. So we lost 99.8% of our interest income as the economy has weakened due to the pandemic. We're going to slice and dice the budget a couple different ways here. There are 4 revenue function categories that we'll look at tonight, and here's a brief description of those. We currently are receiving monies from the top 3 categories, monies produced locally, state at the $7,000 level, and federal at the $8,000 level. We do see $9,000 level expenditures once in a while, and that is when proceeds of long-term debt come through or some interfund transfers. We haven't had any of that recently here, so we will focus on the 3 top categories. This is the story of Mount Lebanon by revenue function. We kind of handle our own business here. 75% of our funding, sometimes upward of 77%, is generated from local sources. That's local taxes, that's charges for services, and that's the people of Mount Lebanon contributing to the funding of our schools. when we're in a situation like this, the onus falls on our local elected officials to help fund their schools. As you can see, about 24% there from the state, and then a very little sliver of federal dollars. Most of those are based on poverty factors. To track that over the years, you can see our reliance on local funds in blue. Orange is the state, and green is the federal piece. That green pie piece stays very low there. You'll look in 10 and 11, that piece did get a little bigger in green, and those were the last time that we had an economic recovery. We were infused with ERA dollars, and those came in the form of federal grants in 2010 and 2011. So we're very hopeful that in this new American Recovery Act that we have some more of those influxes. As you can see, in total, we're down about 1.39% of revenue in total, and the majority of that is 1.8 million in local income, which I talked about. $1 million of that alone is attributed to our interest income, basically dropping off the face of the earth. This budget does not show any state increases beyond Social Security and PSERS reimbursements, which those automatically increase with salary increases. So those are the only state revenues that we're accounting for at this point. So as you can see, not many times can budgeting be easy when your local revenue number looks almost $2 million less than it did the year before, and even over $1 million less than what we collected in 1920. Some of the major local income categories here, other local income, which is a myriad of things as far as charges for services and tuition, or interest or investment earnings, again, down to $12,000 when it used to be over $1 million. Our other taxes at $1.9 million, our earned income tax at $8 million. That was looking to trend to about $8.3 million at this point last year. So that's a significant fall. And then again, our real estate tax, which is 65% of our budget, is generated here locally through real estate taxes. So to kind of put that graph into effect and look at the last few years actuals, the last year's budget, as you can see, there's not a tax increase factored in there. It is the will of the board to enact that tax increase. We will present projections and show what those increases will be later on in here. Again, the earned income tax, it took a hit in the 1920 year, those last 3 months, and again, at one point we were trending to 8.3 million, and that dropped off significantly with the pandemic year. That's something that we track monthly, and the farther we get along in the budget process, I do believe that that will improve. As far as our other taxes, I talked about some things trending appropriately, and then some things we do not want to take the full amount for, because we know there were some anomalies as far as some building sales in our community. Again, the 98.8% reduction in interest income creates a giant hole in your budget. And as far as the other local income, a majority of that is some IDEA money that was shifted from year to year. We're solid on that number now, so that we received about $100,000 more this year, and we expect about $100,000 less next year. So again, we're fighting this local income issue that is down 2.33%, and that is the story of the pandemic and the story of this year's budget season. We'll take a shift here to state revenue. Our largest subsidy is not basic education subsidy anymore. It's actually the retirement contribution. I'll talk about that when we get some later on in slides, that we're paying 35 cents on a dollar that ever goes through payroll here. And that has steadily increased over the last decade, and that's why that subsidy is now our largest. We get just over 6.6 million in basic ed. Special education funding has improved over the last 5 years. The Legislature, however, just needs to put more money through that new special ed formula, so that would be distributed appropriately to the school districts. The big thing with special ed, those costs have increased significantly over the last 10 to 15 years. 5 years ago, the state was funding our special ed costs at 39%, however, now at just 29%. So that number has increased in the subsidy side. However, the expenditures have increased kind of tenfold on that. To look at that graph as far as hard dollars, you'll see some of the categories were not changed or slightly reduced. And then again, the Social Security and PSERS, which are a result of payroll figures funded at 50% by the state, are put in there at the bottom. So not much increase in the major categories for state funding. Again, there's a long way to go in the legislature. We'll see what happens with the new Recovery Act and how that will fund the state, because I will tell you, their coffers were emptied this year to fund schools and other state and local governments to get through this kind of pandemic year, and now it's time for them to reset and use those federal subsidies to try to get back on track. Federal revenue, less than 1% of our budget. However, these are some of the categories that we currently get: Title I, Title II, Title III, and then our access monies that are billed through the medical access for our most needy students. So not a huge chunk of our money, but we use those numbers in those costs specifically to pay salaries and benefits for our reading specialists and some professional development, and to help our most needy kids. Again, the last category are other financing sources. We don't see any big insurance recoveries or bond issue sales in the near future, so there's nothing going on there. So we'll flip to the expenditure side here. This is the piece that I would talk about that don't have anything to do with salaries and benefits. These are department level budgets. There are 39 department level budgets, and most budget managers have multiple responsibilities. So I meet with principals. They're either meet with their department heads and principals and then work on their building budgets, and then work through all these different departments to ensure that we're getting them the consumable supplies and equipments they need to educate our children appropriately. So the first way to look at expenditures is the same way we looked at revenues, and that's by function. We use 5 different function codes here. Obviously, the biggest one, $65 million, going to instruction. $2,000 is our support services. $3,000 non-operational, and then $5,000 is our debt and any transfers out to capital projects funds. So the instruction category kind of deals with anybody that's interacting with a student. So all of our classroom teachers, whether they're regular education, special education, tech ed, even some of the tuitions we pay for those categories for our Parkway West kids and for our special ed student outside placements run through the instructional category. So again, it's broke down basically 3 different ways here. 82% regular education, 16% special education, and then 1,400 is our other, and that includes driver's ed, summer school, alternative ed, and some homebound. So when we break the pie chart down, the figures here, I will tell you the only thing that has increased in this budget, in our initial base budget projection, is the increase of salaries and benefits. So all categories below that have stayed the same as they were last year. So these increases here are what you'll see as salaries and benefits increase. So in those categories, you can see overall in the instructional category, they're up about 3.35%. And I will tell you that is a little less than 3% in salaries. The benefits are a little bit more this year because our health insurance is going up 5%. So that is all calculated through those categories appropriately. The support services part of our budget, that's the second biggest piece after instruction. And again, these are our administrative leaders, logistical support, facilities. Our tech folks are through here, and all the support services related to our students run through the 2000 section of our budget. So here I have them broken out into a pie chart. We'll talk about each category kind of individually here. 2100 is our pupil personnel category. That's guidance, counseling, attendance, psychology, speech, and social workers. 2200 is our technology and the support behind that, library, curriculum development, and staff development. 2300 are any of our board services, tax assessments, our negotiation bills flow through there, our legal category, and that's also the category for the superintendent and some of the principals. 2400 level is our health supervisor and any of our medical personnel and school nurses and health aides. 2500 is the business office where we do budgeting, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, any of our internal auditing, and our printing runs through the business office. 2600, maintenance, buildings and grounds, vehicle maintenance, safety and security, all run through the 2600 department. 2700 is our transportation department. 2800 are evaluation services, staff services, human resources, and data processing. And the 2900 category are actually just pass-through monies. 2900 from the IU. So to look at those categories from a year-to-year and budget to draft basis, again, the only increases taken were for salaries and benefits. So you'll see those increases in a dollar amount and a percentage accordingly. So in the 2000 section of our budget, our support services up 2.72%. And again, that's from built-in contractual salary increases, the Social Security and FICA tax that goes along with that, as well as PSERS, and then again the healthcare costs going up 5%. The 3000s categories, very small categories: student activities and athletics, and some community service monies that are mostly tied to federal dollars and the requirements behind that. So as you can see here, student activities at 740,000. Those are club sponsors, any of our fine arts and their accompanying salaries and benefits run through that piece of the budget. And then our athletic budget, and that's for all of our sports teams, their supplies, their equipment, uniforms, officials, and the salaries and benefits that go along with that. And then our community and recreation and civic services, mostly due to Title I, flow through that 3300 category. So again, to look at that in a dollar for dollar change over the budget last year, again, just a 3.06% increase, and again, mostly due to salaries and benefits. Our capital facilities acquisitions, we do not use the 4,000 section here in our general fund. This is reserved for our capital reserve fund and our capital projects funds here at Mount Lebanon. Our 5,000 category, this is our current debt service expenditures. So this is our debt and any transfers to other funds. So as you can see here, there's a new transfer on here and also a reduction in bond payments. Our bond payments were looking to be over $12 million next year. And because of the refinance that we did of our 2013 bonds this fall, that payment actually drops $300,000. So it was supposed to go $500,000 higher than last year. So it was actually an $800,000 swing in our budget. So we're very thankful that we were able to capture that savings, or this budget could have been much more unaligned. The $70,000 transfer to the food service fund, accounting regulations require overhead to be charged to the food service department because we're in-house. And that's a self-operating fund. We transfer them money for their utilities and some of the overhead that goes along with that. So we don't have to charge that back to our students and our parents in lunch prices. And new this year is our transfer to capital reserve fund. Normally, we had a sequestered piece of the fund balance that we would take this from, but those categories have shifted greatly, and the projections for those will be different with the pandemic. So we're actually budgeting for a transfer of $250,000 to capital reserve. And this would be in addition to the leftover monies that are currently in the capital reserve fund that would address our $500,000 in capital needs through our facilities department this summer. Again, to look at it from a dollar by dollar, a year by year situation, you can see the reduction of $291 there for the bond payment. Again, that could have been $800,000 higher than it currently is. The new capital reserve transfer, which if you look back to the 1920 year, you'll see that significant transfer to do our turf and capital projects in the 1920 year. And then again, our yearly food service transfer to offset some of their overhead costs. So this is the second way, and probably the most familiar way, that people look at our expenditures. These dimensions are used to describe the 9 object codes that we book things to. Obviously, salaries and benefits, purchase professional services, repairs and maintenance, other professional services, supplies, equipment, other objects, and other use of funds, which actually the 800 and 900 section, again, make up our transfers and our debt service payments. So we'll look at each one of these categories on the object level to get through the home stretch of our presentation here. So by object, salaries and benefits take up 79% of our budget. You add the 10% for debt and transfers over there, and 89 to 90% of your budget is filled out before you even turn a light on. And that 79% is eerily close to the percentage of revenue that comes from local sources. And I think I say this as a theme here in Mount Lebanon. We kind of handle our business in-house here with our reliance on our local sources. So 76% of our revenue from local sources. Again, 79% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. So I broke each category out on a single-digit object function, and this is, again, our increases. As you can see, just under 3% for across-the-board salary increases, and that is teachers matriculating through their STEP system, custodians who are currently negotiating a CBA, and then all of our other employees. And then, again, the accompanying benefits have increased accordingly with the increase in PSERS, with the increase in salaries, and then the 5% increase in healthcare. Just a small reduction down there in the other financing sources, and that again was our debt service payment and our transfers to capital reserve and transfers to the food service fund. So in total, the expenditures just up 2.76%. I don't think it can be said enough times. We don't have an expenditure problem here currently in this budget year. We have a revenue problem, particularly in local revenue, and it's something that every school district in the Commonwealth is dealing with. So to talk about salaries and benefits, you got to talk about staffing, and this is kind of why the district has stayed solvent over the last 40 years, and it's the management of its people and the board's willingness to raise taxes to accommodate those people. So as you can see, over the last 12 years here, enrollment just about the same there on the bottom, and each category has been reduced except for our PCA category, and I explained a little bit of that. Monday night, we have the establishment of 3 ABA classrooms here and the accompanying people to staff those, and just the needs of special ed and IEPs have gone up, and that's also a cost savings to us. Without us being able to handle those wonderful children in our district, they would be sent to outside placements. So it's a cost savings, and we believe they're best served here in Mount Lebanon. So obviously, our professional teachers are our biggest salary number. When you break those down by a 2-digit object code, you can see the different categories of folks that we pay through here. And again, just under a 3% salary increase. So salaries just below 3%. Again, that's a factor of us keeping our staffing level in this initial base budget. We haven't entered all the retirements and changes and anything that will come up our assistant superintendents, our human resource department, will work through staffing based on enrollment and how things are going for next school year, and that will be part of the budget when we bring it back to the board in April. So benefits, the second biggest piece of the pie when you talk about object level expenditures. And the big one here is the $18.4 million on the left-hand side. There in the orange. I don't think in any other industry would you see 56% of your benefit expenditures going towards pension. That's a crisis. The PSERS crisis has been 10 to 15 years in the making, and we continue to make those payments at 35 cents on a dollar. We do get reimbursed for half of that, but if it wasn't for those pension figures, that fund is underfunded, and people that are receiving a pension today probably wouldn't be getting one if we didn't contribute that amount. And it always needs to be said that our employees, that is deducted from their pay. So whatever percentage that they chose to pay to their pension based on when they were hired is coming out of their check every month. Second piece there, the $9.9 million, almost $10 million in health insurance. And then you can see Social Security, again, a payroll tax being the other piece of that. A couple other categories, tuition reimbursements, unemployment comp, workers' comp. Those categories are a sliver compared to those three big ones. Healthcare trends, you can't say enough about the 47 districts in Allegheny County and their Allegheny County Health Insurance Consortium. It keeps rates down. We don't see the national 10 to 15% increases in healthcare. That's a $350 self-managed, self-insured fund of school districts in and around Allegheny County. And though their increase is almost 5%, as you can see, those increases as far as actual dollars spent over the last 10 years have been very minimal. So we're very thankful for our participation in that. And though the 5% is a high increase this year, most governments like to keep 2 to 3 months of bills in fund balance. And because they're a self-insured fund, and they need to pay claims, it's very important for them to have those reserves. This slide, it kind of demonstrates the PSERS crisis over the last 10 years. So let's say our payroll number, which is just almost $53 million next year. What if our payroll number had never changed? Would it have always been that number all the way back to a decade ago? You'd see that our payroll cost in 12-13 was just 6.5 million. That is over 18.5 million this year. So incrementally, it's increased. The majority of tax increases that have been approved by this board have been to cover the PSERS crisis over the last decade. To look at that in actual dollar amounts, you see, just shy of 5% in health insurance increase. Social Security up again due to payroll, and then that significant PSERS number. That the percentage only went up from 34.54 to 34.91. However, because we have an increase in salaries, that number gets quite significant. So our benefits increased just over $1.4 million, about 4.5% from the previous year. Now we'll talk about some of the other categories. These are kind of the ones that we do have some control over outside of our salaries and benefits. Our purchase professional services, just over $3.3 million. Administrative services, educational services, that's AIU and consultants. We have doctors, lawyers, auditors, and negotiators that we need to pay yearly. Some technical services, security services, some professional development. Make up that 3,000 category. The 400 category, again, the budget just shy of $1 million. The majority of this runs through the facilities department, as you can see, some rentals of equipment and porta-johns and whatnot, cleaning services, utility services, and just some general repair and maintenance contractors that we have for certain things over the year. Our 500 category, our student transportation contractor, we do spend about $1 million on First Student every year, and they drive our special ed students to their outside placements or anywhere they need to go in between schools. Our general liability insurance, communication, advertising, printing and binding, tuition, which does include charter schools and outside special ed placements, and any travel and conferences. Most of the travel and conferences, I will tell you, are spent through our Title II program for professional development, and then any miscellaneous expenditures. Most of that is actually for institutionalized children and some expenditures for the AIU. So charter schools have been a big topic the last 2 years in the government and the governor's budget proposals. This year's budget does include charter reform. We have seen an uptick in charter school students. Our number usually averages around 20 to 24 students. We've been locked in at 37 students currently this year. So we're projecting that budget to come in about $228,000 over budget. And again, that's another result of the pandemic. So the governor's proposal would help us greatly. It would put a cap on tuition of regular ed students, on special ed students who attend cyber, which the majority of our 37 do attend cyber and not in-person charter schools. So that would be a significant savings to the district should that piece of the budget legislation be passed. So we'll be hopeful for that. Our supply budget, this is our consumables. As you can see, $1.8 million in general supplies. Again, that's department level, building level, art supplies. We buy frogs to dissect, cleaning items, anything you can think of down to pencils and crayons and whatnot are our general supplies. Our energy category, which is just over $1 million, our energy rates did change as far as January 1st is concerned. We signed a new energy contract where all of our energy is now carbon free and actually a reduced rate over our last 5-year contract. So we're very pleased with that so far. Unfortunately, it was a cold January and February, and the bills didn't quite reflect that. So we'll project some more of that as we get to the warmer months here. The books and periodical categories, which has actually increased because the way the state account coding says now we do buy some small technology through the books and periodicals when they're under a certain threshold. The equipment category, just $94,000. The majority of our tech purchases, just over $725,000 every year, is the refresh on our technology. A Chromebook, an iMac, an iPad, a desktop computer, they only last 4 to 5 years, and every 4 to 5 years you have to replace them. So we're on a replacement schedule for all those thousands of devices. So this would just be certain departments asking for iPads or some specific piece of equipment, maybe even a tech ed that would come through the equipment category. But the majority of our equipment is bought through the capital fund. Another different way to look at our debt, which was the 5,000 section of the function level piece of the budget. Again, broken out by principal and interest, and then our transfers to food service and capital reserve. Again, that capital reserve transfer new to the budget this year, $250,000, and that would be transferred to our fund to address our $500,000 in needs over the summer. So look at our bond payments over time. You see the uptick there in 27, 28, 28, 29, 29, 30. That uptick was initially supposed to happen 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, and then level off. So we bought ourselves a few years there, and actually the $800,000 savings has been wonderful for our budget. We actually took a portion of that savings this year, so that's helping us deal with some of the local revenue shortfalls and additional expenditures related to COVID. So those are our bond payments over time. The 13 bonds, you can see their small sliver there in kind of Carolina blue at the bottom there. We do have to make the interest payments on our old 2013 bond until those are paid off. So that's all factored into our bond payments. So what does all that information mean? I gave you the information function level, object level, showed short increases, small increases for salaries and benefits, and how does that affect the bottom line? So as you can see, what happened the last 2 years, 1920, we did budget to use $1 million worth of fund balance that year. That was a year where we added 3.5 counselors and also had 22 sabbaticals. So that $1 million was budgeted to be used in fund balance that year. Additionally, we had the $2.4 million expenditure to go to the capital fund to address our field and turf and track project, and additionally to take care of our capital projects and our technology refresh. So that's why you see the expenditures there, just over $3.5 million more than budgeted. This year, the board's response to the pandemic was a no mill increase budget. So that put our budget short $2.775 million this year. We're watching that monthly. Again, we got grants from the federal government. We're spending more in other categories than we thought due to the pandemic. So we're doing everything we can to manage that $2.7 million and make sure it's not that much money used at the end of the year. So our draft for next year. So let's say we had no tax increases. We continue to project these shortfalls in revenues. We'd be short $1.4 million from where we were the year before. You take revenues over expenditures. Our expenditures going up just 2.76%, and you create a deficit of $7.1 million. Again, remember, we started the year $2.8 million behind the 8 ball. We're adding to that deficit by having our local revenue shortfalls of $1.8 million. So we were kind of $4.6 million behind before we added almost those $3 million in benefits. And again, those were contractual and healthcare and pension related expenditures. So to flip to the next slide, this is what a tax increase to the index would look like. You see the margins would change significantly, just over $2.3 million. So you would see our revenues uptick there, $2.3 million, just a slight increase over the budgeted amount for 2021. Expenditures would stay the same, again, just up 2.76%. So the deficit we're looking to cover right now is just shy of $4.8 million. Equated to mills, that is 1.7854 mills. Now, it's actually impossible for the board to vote for a tax increase over 0.8675 mills. So we are looking for essentially $4.8 million, either in additional revenue or a reduction in expenditures. We're very hopeful that the new stimulus package will influx money to the state and then eventually to us to fill some of those gaps. That will only be one-time money. If we do get these federal funds, it's not like those federal funds will stay around forever. It's a one-time situation. It's a one-year plug in your budget, and then we would have to project out in the future what that would do and what our fund balance would look like through the years. So I like to describe to everybody here, again, we just added salaries and benefits to this budget. So we kept everything the way it was last year. So if you look at our salary increase, it equates to 0.5643 mils. Our PSERS increase, 0.3146 mils. Our Social Security tax, 0.0425 mils, and our healthcare costs, 0.1749 mils. So that was an increase of just shy of $3 million, $2.9 million, or 1.0963 mils. Again, over the available millage that the board is able to raise taxes due to the Act 1 index. So again, it's just very important to manage your employees, manage your staffing levels, align that with your enrollment so you can control costs through bodies working with the school district. It's just this government is unique. It's not like a private sector business where we're making widgets. which is a people-intensive business, and those people are our teachers and our folks that are in front of our students every day. So a lot of people ask, well, what's a tax increase mean to me? What does a tax increase look like? If you look at the assessed value of a home, I put 5 different levels up there. So what a 0.8675 mil increase would be $86.75 per $100,000 in value. So I calculated that out accordingly, and that's what the yearly increase on someone's tax bill would be if their home is assessed at those levels. And then if you look at the monthlies underneath there, most people have their real estate tax escrowed through a mortgage, and that's what their mortgage payment would go up monthly to cover a tax increase to the index. Over the past 12 years here, the board has averaged 0.5 or a 1.23% increase. There are, the 10-11 year is unique. That was the year that we were grandfathered in to exceed the index to cover the debt payments for the new high school that we're sitting in. So again, the incremental increase in real estate taxes over the years is the most common way, the most prudent way, the most fiscally responsible way to cover increases in your budgets. These are some of our local comparators in their millage rates. We kind of have to ignore Peters Township there, them being in Washington County, but you can see that we're not quite at the South Fayette and Upper St. Clair level as of yet. So we like to watch these comparators, again, like our staffing levels, and see where we benchmark ourselves against our neighbors in best in class. So what does fund balance look like if we continue on the path we're on? As we stand today with a $7.1 million deficit, again, that's without a tax increase, without any help from the state, and without reducing any of our expenditures. In 1 year, our fund balance would completely be depleted. We'd be left with $1 million. Again, that would be us using the entire $2.775 million that we're budgeted to use this year. And then I calculated this a different way, again, with a tax increase to the index of getting us just over $2.3 million. Our fund balance, if we used $4.8 million more in fund balance, would be $3.4 million at the end of the 2022 school year. So again, difficult times, both because of the pandemic. I think that's really the only story here. The pandemic has wreaked havoc on our local revenues. It has wreaked havoc on the state revenues. It has wreaked havoc on our charter school expenditures and just some of the additional needs that we need around here. And we need to take the appropriate actions as administrators and board members to address those shortfalls, and we'll continue to reduce and refine and estimate our revenues from now until May, until we get to a balanced budget. So you can see, these are our fund balance levels over the last 10 to 12 years here. We're probably at our lowest since 2011. Again, that 2021 number is projected, and that's if we would use the full $2.775 million that was part of the no mill increase budget. So keeping this consistent, keeping our fund balance as level as possible means economic stability. It's why our bond rating is what it is, and one of the factors, and we must make the necessary budget decisions to make sure we have these reserves in place. So just a couple lines about fund balance. The GFOA is an organization I hold near and dear to my heart, and it's where a lot of my professional development comes from. But the GFOA recommends at minimum that a government has at least 2 months of bills in reserve in their fund balance. So their recommendation, again, is over $18 million. We pay about $9 million a month in bills. Currently, our fund balance at June 30th, 20, that's our last audited figure, just over $11 million. Our unassigned fund balance which is driven by board policy that was reduced this year to 5% from 6% to address some of our capital needs. Is just at $5.3 million there. And then school code also does not let you exceed 8% of your budget in unassigned fund balance. Fund balances are in a couple different categories, but that unassigned category can never read more than 8% of the next year's budget. So just rolling over 50 minutes there, that was a breakdown of our budget a couple different ways. I hope this community found it helpful. Thanks for tuning in. It's my pleasure to present to the board and the community and help you understand our budget. It's been a goal of mine since I became a business manager, and a mentor of mine used to say, Rob, you need to explain the budget to your other administrators and particularly the school board members, so if they get asked a question about the budget in the grocery store, they can answer it. So we try to talk in layman's terms and understandable terms so we can do that. If you have any questions about this presentation, about what's in the budget, please email me at the email address below or call my office. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I will make a shameless plug for 2 documents that we prepare here in the business office every year, and that's our comprehensive annual financial report. This is our audited financial statements plus 10 years of historical data about our financial results, and then our meritorious budget award, which we prepare every year, and this is about a 220-page document with tons of narrative about the current 2021 budget that we're in, and we will continue to prepare that for the 21-22 budget. In case you missed it tonight, tonight's forum was recorded along with my other 2 presentations. So you can look at the My Lebo YouTube page or search my name, and those 2 will come up. There's a Budget 101 presentation and my budget preparation forum from last year, and then I got into some more detail this year. So the 3 of these presentations should help you get the gist of how our budget process works and some of the issues that we're dealing with. I will bring budgets to the board at least 5 more times coming up over the next 5 meetings, and we will take into account all the necessary refinements and projections and make a best case scenario and a recommendation to our board for the May meeting to get a balanced budget. So I appreciate you all, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.